What?
All right, so it is 5:31 on November 6th. Been a while since we've seen you all.
Mr. Chair, I do have one, we do want to pull the minutes off the agenda, the October 2nd.
Okay.
You don't have them, so there's just the one addition correction.
All right, sounds good. So I'd like to call to order the public hearing to consider file number 2023-26, a request for a 12-lot subdivision on behalf of Integrity Building and Construction. A forum of the commission is present, and I will now ask all commissioners whether to disclose the ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, and bias or bias in this matter. So let me start down the line over here.
I have no ex parte or.
I also have none.
I have some. I guess experts in contact. In that I recently sold a parcel that is shown on this map that I just sold. Representative buyer, I'm familiar with the location. I guess is why I'm bringing it up. I didn't represent IBC time, but I spent some time on these parcels and understand a little bit of the geography there and what some of the plans are that they have in this. What bias, and if anything comes up, that's probably relevant. It's not going to be your answer. I didn't come across it.
Right, Commissioner Armour?
I have none.
I have none.
I live nearby and walked frequently by the area and did so this weekend. I didn't really have anything that I learned of note, other than I did see it. But I guess I'm also familiar with the general topography, but no other contacts or bias.
Thank you, and Chair, I have none myself. All right, would anyone in the audience like to question any commissioner for any disclosure, ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member or commissioner? And for audience members who are watching on video conference and Zoom, please use the raise hand feature in the webinar controls if you wish to speak. Audience members listening by phone, please use the following commands on your phone's dial pad: *9 to raise hand if you wish to speak, or *6 to toggle mute and unmute. So we all clear? All right, so in tonight's hearing, we will use the following order for presentations. We will begin with staff report. Then the applicant will make its presentation. We will take testimony from anyone in favor for the application. We will then take testimony for anyone neutral or opposed to the application. If there is opponent testimony, the applicant will then have an opportunity to present final rebuttal. The applicants have the last word because an applicant has the burden of proof of compliance to the mandatory approval criteria. After we hear testimony, we will check again to see if staff has any parting comments. Finally, after everyone has interested in these matters has had a chance to testify, we will close the record, deliberate, and may render a decision tonight. There are some basic rules for presenting testimony in tonight's hearing. Only present testimony in the order which I just recited, and only do so at the podium in the front of the table, in the front of the room, unless you are watching or listening by Zoom. Please begin with your name and mailing address. Please limit your testimony to applicable criteria. And please note that any failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to allow us or the parties to respond to the issue will preclude an appeal to City Council or LUBA based on that issue. And failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow us to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. So does anyone have any procedural questions or issues they would like to raise? Seeing none, may we have the staff report, please?
just to confirm, James, you didn't see anyone raise their hand? No procedural issues or challenges to PC? Okay, just for the record, just want to make sure that that was. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You do have one matter on tonight. The request here is file number 2326. It is a 12-lot subdivision request in an R2 zone submitted on behalf of Integrity Building. We have representatives here from the applicants and developers team. This request comes to you as a quasi-judicial request. All subdivisions come through the Planning Commission for consideration. The standards which really are impacted here and involve are listed in the staff report. They've been advertised. They include 1703, 1720, Title 16, especially 1608 and 1612, which are land division chapters. No variances from the zoning standards have been requested. The notice of public hearing has been submitted to all property owners within 250 feet, provided access to the information. Today, I did send out some information provided after the record was available 7 days in advance. For you, this information comes from 2 neighboring property owners that submitted information as well as a response by the applicant. So that information has been sent to you. It should be included in the record as a part of the proceedings. Both applicant, well, to summarize the neighborhood comments, both of them expressed concerns regarding the connectivity of the offsite private street that extends through lot 1300. That issue is addressed by staff in the staff report, specifically condition of approval number 21 regarding connectivity to comply with the access requirements for the lots, as well as the transportation system plan. So this is where staff and the neighbors are a little bit at odds here in terms of the connectivity requirements. Counsel for the applicant submitted a response to some of the concerns that were raised in materials that you had been provided, specifically in terms of some of the lot frontage improvements and the water line improvement required by the city's engineer. So we'll probably touch on those in your deliberation. It's really the summary of the supplemental information you have. You have a condition, a recommendation from the staff for approval of the matter, with conditions of approval attached and included in your staff report. I believe they are on pages 48 to 50. And really, that's the summary of what we have. We're here for your deliberation questions. I know the applicant has just a few comments to say in terms of their application, but we're here for your questions.
Can I ask you about 10-inch water line now?
Sure.
Before we get to it and back into it.
Yeah, the 10-inch line. So what you have is a request from engineering regarding the extension of line down Belmont. Currently, there is no water line in Belmont. There is no water service, city water service west of 22nd. We're getting to the point where Ice Fountain provides water to the south. The water in Belmont now is only the transmission line that provides city service. So we don't connect to that transmission line from the city's water service. Therefore, these utilities are included. What you have is a request and requirements for a loop water system. Those 2 lines are shown currently to extend from 22nd. Engineering is requesting a 3rd connection point to allow the entire system to be looped in order to provide future access to development to the west. So you have some response from council. We'd be happy to prepare additional findings to respond to Nolan and Dolan issues that have been raised. We would do that with council prior to, if you all recommend approval, prior to the chair signing any decision. So.
Can you clarify what you just said? The differential of the request is 210 feet of the extending to the west on Belmont. Is that correct?
The request does not have a line in Belmont. So it's actually
Engineering is wants,
correct.
it's not connected to anything, it's connected to the Belmont frontage.
Correct. So the line currently terminates 250 feet of dead end line, north to south orientation in Henderson. Engineering request an extension approximately 400 feet from the city's water system on 22nd Street, extending to the west to connect to that line, allowing that line to essentially have a loop connection.
That's what
Okay.
I wanted to make, understood something different from what you just said.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
Maybe staff applicant, I mean, one of the things in the application material shows that there's not subdivision. What we just well. That you should get the 13 lot subdivision out of this application package. Look at the page. These first, yeah, it's on here, but. It's the first thing behind the applicant's narrative.
Maybe we can get the
Appendix A.
clarify that.
Yeah.
First thing after the applicant subdivision? Or
Yeah, after the applicant's narrative, I think. Yeah, yeah, page 64 packet.
Oh.
65.
correct. What you have is the larger parcel that's been subdivided and sold off as lot one.
Right, but it's not part of the subdivision.
It's correct.
Okay, anything else for staff? Right, we'll open it up to the applicant. If you could step up to the podium and turn the microphone on, that'd be helpful.
Right on the, there you go. Great.
Thank you, Chair Frost. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Garrett Stevenson. My address is 1211 Southwest Fifth Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon 97205, 204. Excuse me. Elizabeth Betts, who is our project engineer, with me tonight, and I want to start by thanking staff. As you can see from our letters that we submitted in the record, we had some initial concerns about a number of conditions of approval, and we worked with staff to get those down to just one. And as far as the findings of staff and the conditions that we talked about originally, I think we're pretty happy with those. The only thing I wanted to mention tonight, because I'm obligated to under Oregon state law, is the letter that I sent, I guess it was late last week, talking about our concern about this discrete extension of the water line. And basically, the law on this, and I'm going to let Elizabeth talk a little about the engineering, but the law on this is pretty simple. And in Oregon, and of course throughout the nation, if the city wants us to build something that improves the system, we can build it. But if we're not using it, in simple terms, the city has to help pay for it or pay for it entirely. And so in this case, what you see a lot of times is, okay, we have a subdivision, the city naturally, and I understand why they want an extension of that 10-inch line, would want the 10-inch line. And a lot of times the way we would deal with that is through something like system development charge credits or something. The problem that I saw here, and the problem I still see, is it's not clear that this 10-inch line extension would qualify for system development charge credits, which would be the normal way of having the city participate from a capital standpoint in getting this thing built. So we're objecting not to, we're objecting really to only condition 25 and only to the extent that it requires us to build an extension of that 10-inch line that we're not proposing to use. The takings law basically says is that a condition of approval has to be have a nexus to an impact that we're causing on the system, and has to be roughly proportional in terms of essentially in terms of the dollar value of the improvement to our impact on the system. Well, in this case, our proposal is to connect to the city system in a different location, does not connect to that 10-inch line. Elizabeth will talk a little bit more about that. And therefore, the problem from a constitutional standpoint with this particular component of this condition is that there is no nexus. In other words, if we're not using the 10-inch line, there's really no basis for the city to require us to have to extend it all the way and then of course dead end it. The second piece of that is the rough proportionality piece. Those of you that have served on a planning commission for a long time probably heard that term. Basically, it means that the amount that we would have to pay to extend this line is roughly proportional to our impact on the city's water system. And the line would basically be a freebie to the city. We spend something in the realm between $80,000 and $90,000 to build it, but again, we wouldn't be accessing it. And so I think our concern is that it's one of these things where we understand why engineering wants it built. We understand that city engineering wants to have as much of its system built out as it can, and a lot of times the way it does that is through developer exactions, but there's a constitutional problem with this particular limited exaction. And so I go over that in my letter. I'm not going to belabor the point tonight. And I guess the only thing we would ask is that you approve the application and take off that requirement for the extension of that 10-inch line. Elizabeth, you can go ahead and explain why that is from an engineering standpoint, but unless you have any other questions, that concludes my testimony for tonight.
Scared. I'm Elizabeth Betts. I'm a civil engineer with Pine and Associates at 1411 13th Street, Heron Head River. And as Garrett said, it's a pretty straightforward subdivision. We have no problems with any of the conditions other than that water main. The water main is 481 feet of water main, 10-inch water main, about 481 feet. The city's asking for it to extend from the intersection of 22nd and Belmont, down Belmont to just the west side of our lot 1. That's lot 1 that's on Belmont. We don't need that water main as far as pressure and water to the subdivision, because we're planning to loop we're bringing two mains off of 22nd Street through tax lot 1300 and tax lot 1002, which are both IBC owned. So we'll have a loop within the central part of our subdivision to 22nd Street. And the pressure at our lot 1 will be essentially the same as it is at like the Nazarene Church and any of those residences right there on 22nd Street. So as far as water service, we don't have a 10-inch main. We also looked in the city's water master plan, which I have a 2017 version, and it doesn't show a 10-inch water main in Belmont as part of the master plan. The master plan shows future connections south to, I believe the city had planned to take over that section of Ice Mountain water. So we don't see a need for it in the water master plan. There are, from what I can tell, are about 4 water mains in Belmont. There's an Ice Fountain 8-inch main, which is active, which we can't connect to. There's a 24-inch high pressure city water main, which we can't connect to because that's the city's main water service. There's an abandoned, I think 16-inch, and that the 24-inch replaced. And then there's another main, I don't know what it is, but it shows up on some other plans. And at one point, Wade Seaborn, the previous city engineer, said, well, there might be a water main up there. We don't know. But as far as I could, I'm piecing this together. I don't have all of the city's information. But as far as I can tell, the care center, which is up kind of just west of the intersection of 22nd, is connected to a city water main. Which at least that's what the city's public utility maps show, which tells me there's a water main we could possibly connect to somewhere in Belmont, if that's a desire. But as far as need for the 10-inch, we don't. For our project, we don't need the 10-inch, and we see that as something that the city desires to have, but not necessarily necessary for us.
Right. So I'm gonna ask, I'm confused still again as to whether there was any proposed community development in Belmont. I thought the disputed area was just the extension from, say, Henderson to the west, but
No, it's the entire Belmont.
entire
piece
Belmont.
of-
Yep, that's
Yeah, we were
correct.
showing the amount of dead end we would have in Belmont. Of what the city originally was asking versus what we were proposing as a dead end on Henderson. That is what my memo had. And then the city clarified and said just to the west, they just wanted to extend it to the west side of lot 1. Which is a total of 481 feet of 10-inch main in Belmont. So that's the current condition of 25, I believe is. The to the west side of lot 1.
In your packet, I think, for illustratives on pages 93 and 94, the applicant prepared, it's a graphic exhibit of what the applicant proposes, page 93, what city engineering has requested, page 94.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but and I apologize, I said that was the last thing I was gonna say, and then I forgot something that I wish I had said, so I'm gonna back. The other concern we have, the takings thing is fairly clear in the sense that we're required to mitigate for our impacts. We have no impact that would require extension of this line. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I think probably one of the reasons why we're having this issue is that during the annexation proceedings happened last year, there was a number of conditions that were negotiated through. I know Elizabeth worked on them, Dustin worked on them, and the city engineer worked on them. I don't know that the city engineer that's proposing this, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin, but I don't know if he was involved in that discussion during the annexation.
Oh, wait.
But we came up with a list of conditions that we said, all right, these are going to be the conditions that this application is subject to. And in my letter, I pointed out that that list, which is a contract, it's an annexation agreement signed by my client, signed by the city. It didn't include extension of this 10-inch line. It didn't include a requirement that we connect to the 10-inch line. I don't know if the city engineer was aware of that agreement, and if he or she wasn't, it's very possible because those things get tucked into annexation files and they don't pop right out. So that might be the reason for the dispute, but it also adds the other problem of having conditions that are fundamentally inconsistent with the conditions that we already agreed to on this project and that were embodied in that annexation agreement. That's the only other thing I wanted to add, unless you've got more questions for me.
You made a previous statement that you thought that it was not appropriate, that there could be some credit towards system development charges or other things for this project.
Right, so Elizabeth mentioned that this, and I took a look at it too, we were looking to see whether or not this particular line is on the city's capital improvement plan for its water system. And you can only get SDC credits for something that is adopted on the city's capital improvement plan. And if, I think that there's an alternative history where the city came out and said they wanted this during the annexation. We said, okay, you need to update your capital improvement plan to get this line onto it so that under the city's SDC ordinance, we could actually ask for credits. And in that scenario, if it were on the capital improvement plan, depending on the cost of it, we could get essentially made whole by the city through going through that SDC credit process. We can't do that here because the city never put the line on its master plan. I don't know if that.
That's where my question is.
So I'm, the connection on Belmont, if there is a 10-inch, would provide that the dead end portion is in the, in the right of way, basically, right? Not as part of the subdivision, it's part of, I guess, the future city.
It's what we would call a boundary improvement. And so it's an improvement that happens around the outside of the property that we want to develop.
She's at
Right.
a specific
But
location.
what I'm saying is the dead end portion, in your proposal, you have a dead end portion in this subdivision.
Right, our
line.
dead end is in within.
Yes, okay, and this is putting the dead end outside of the subdivision where it may in the future not be a dead end. Is that correct? Is that the difference?
Correct, well, we're dead ending to a spot where it could be connected later if there were a line there, or if it were to go south to connect to like Ice Fountain, if that became part of the city's system. So that's we're proposing to dead end at Belmont, you know, in Henderson at Belmont.
Okay.
You know, we can, it doesn't have to be like, you know, it can be wherever it needs to be in Belmont at that location, but it makes sense to dead end it kind of like at our subdivision limits because we need to put blow off our hydrant there as a dead end. You can't just dead end it like in the middle of the road. So that. Yeah, I mean, but basically what you were saying is that we are proposing to dead end. Okay.
I mean, I guess I'm saying in 10 years. What does this look like as, I mean, what is the possibility for this being a totally looped system with no dead end in 10 years? Is, I guess what I'm trying to.
Well, according to the city's water master plan that we have, it shows it going south to the Ice Fountain system connecting, you know, I think the plan is for that to be owned by the city. And in that case, it would be completely.
Was there a,
Yeah, Mike Keller, 3850 May Street. Do you mind if I think I hear your question, and the answer is there is no difference to the dead end of where it's located in the right of way. There is a difference in the location on GPS where it's located on the earth. So both would be in right of way, both have the opportunity to be continued and looped. The difference is ours is within our subdivision and dedicated at the end of our subdivision, so you could easily loop into it. The other one is taking ours, connecting it to a new 10-inch, running that 10-inch farther down and dead ending it in right of way also. So both end in right of way. One
Right.
is the opportunity to loop does not change. The proportion of built water line does change. Does that make sense? So your opportunity to loop is not any different.
In the plan that he's proposing. I mean, he's gonna have to dead end one of them anyway, because they're
Correct.
serving houses, so that one's in both plans. One that's parallel to the Belmont, is clear.
well, that just unclarified everything. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand they're obviously in the right of way, like you're not building water lines like through somebody's basement.
yeah, so
But that was my question of the vision that you would have in, based on your reading of the plan, is that it would eventually connect to an existing line that is maybe going to become part of the city owned at some point in the future.
it could be a new line, it could be ice fountains, depending on what the agreement is there between the water rights, for sure. Yeah,
Okay,
but both, and I think this is important, and I just bring this up. On page 93 and page 94, I want to make sure you're looking at the maps very clear. The conversation is this keeps getting looped under this, not unintended, under this term to loop the water system. This is not solving the loop. This is creating a dead end. Both scenarios create a dead end. The difference is we go out and build a whole new water line that dead ends versus building our water line to our subdivision that dead ends. So it's not a solve. This does not solve any loop water system. I think that's really important to know in this commission, and that itself is the reason I'm objecting to do it.
well, I mean, I think we understand that for now, there's going to be a dead end.
Correct.
But what I've been asking is what happens in the future, so I appreciate, I think I understood
This gives the same opportunity.
the
to-
answer that you're giving.
Could you clarify in your plan, are there two dead ends? I mean, is that the connection that I found is not happening in Henderson?
Correct. Yeah.
There is one connection that
It's two dead
we
ends.
originally proposed a connection in Ice Fountain and so by the city, so. It's just a dead end for now.
Yes, question.
Are you objecting to all elements of condition 25? Or, yeah, okay,
No,
Just
no, just.
2 and 3, or just 3?
Just the requirement in condition 25 that we extend the 25, we extend the 10-inch line. You know, all the way to the end. I mean, I think what we really want to do is build a plan that Elizabeth has come up with that does not utilize the ice.
We're not realizing what's found and not extending.
Right. And so I think that the condition as written would give us some flexibility on that. But the main thing that, and I didn't want to go in and sort of muck around with re-editing it. The principle here is really simple. We don't need to connect to this 10-inch line, and we don't want to build the extension because we don't need it. I think the right way for the city to handle this, because I understand, you know, trust me, I understand where you're sitting, you want to do the best for the city, but the right way to handle something like this is to get that line. First of all, make sure that that line is exactly what the city wants, and this is not on you, but it's really on your engineering team. To make sure that's the new line that you really want and put that into the master plan. That makes this a lot more easy to do. And I'm concerned, frankly, that this line was not shown on the master plan. That now maybe there's an engineering reason for it, but I think that that's something that expensive that is that wide, you know, that wide and potentially goes that long, because I think the idea would be to extend it all the way to Ice Fountain's other line, which is way out to the west, I think.
Eventually,
Yeah.
I think it would head all the way to Frankton.
Yeah.
That's like, but it's,
I mean,
the section of Belmont's not showing as having a walking.
yes.
You know, in the short term or long term projects.
So, you know, Oregon's a pay to play state, and pay to play means you have to build all the infrastructure that's going to serve your property. But what it doesn't mean is that you have to build infrastructure that you're not going to utilize just to serve the city. And so I think there's a way to do this right. I don't think imposing this condition is that way.
Question about the just the technical aspect of this loop system. So engineering recommends it coming off of Belmont. Is there a technical reason that would be preferred to come off of Belmont versus their plan?
Yeah, and I can answer that now, or I can wait to go through all of them too. So, I mean, part of the loop system is now lots 1, 2, and 3. 25% of the lots within the subdivision now would be on a dead end line. Adding the Belmont extension from the city's service provides the entire subdivision now. Well, those 3 lots on a loop system. They're currently on a dead end line that terminates in Henderson. The extension and intertie to the city system in 22nd Street would provide those houses with a looped water system.
So you're saying that with the Belmont's design, there would be fewer houses on a dead end line,
Yes.
and that's preferred under engineering standards, I presume?
Well-
They prefer looping, but there are certainly many dead end water mains in the city, especially when it's something that is dead ended for future extension.
I guess, you know, the way I would respond to that is, there's a plan for dealing with the dead end line. That plan would be implemented, whether it's a dead end 10-inch line or a dead end 8-inch line inside the subdivision, and those serve people all the time. Typically, it's just a fire hydrant, periodically you clean it out. I guess from a legal standpoint, my issue with that is that if the city wanted this, you know, very long extension of a 10-inch line, it had the opportunity to ask for that when we were going through annexation. It didn't. We entered into an agreement with the city that did not include that requirement. And so whether or not one is incrementally better from an engineering standpoint or not, I think it still leaves the question of, okay, if that's really what absolutely needed to happen, that conversation should have happened at the annexation stage. Because there was a lot of work that went into those conditions of approval and that made it into that annexation agreement. So that's really a legal point, but I don't think that it's an engineering necessity one way or the other.
So I'm assuming that there is a connection point. That there is a 10-inch line that runs on Belmont to 22nd.
In Belmont, there's a 24-inch, that's the high pressure.
Okay,
And then it heads north of the, which is in 22nd.
Okay,
So 22nd has the 10-inch.
so 22nd has, I see,
Yeah.
so that's why it has a full.
Dot, put in a T
Okay,
and then I'm not gonna jog because we have to get down below the pressure.
so we're
Yeah,
we're
that's-
basically grabbing onto a north-south line and taking it west.
Yes, okay, that was I was trying to figure out why there was like a,
The reason it's got that funny angle on it is because the 22nd Street main is high pressure until it hits a pressure reducing station or valve. And so we would have to get our water for, with the city's request for that 10-inch main in Belmont, you have to go below that pressure reducing valve
right,
to connect. So that's why it has that funny angle in it.
thank you, that makes sense, and then, okay. I know, I'm sure you explained that somewhere in here, but
I probably did.
I appreciate you being patient.
Questions for the applicants? I just wanted to address the neighbor's, letter in the packet today about the through access on the private roads. Is that something that is intended to be followed off?
We had a discussion before the hearing with your planning director, and as far as we're concerned, if the city wants us to install bollards there, we can. But we understand that connectivity that we have in that private access drive is required by the code, and that is the reason why the staff report of condition 21 asks us not to put bollards there.
Any other questions for applicant? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that then, we will take any testimony from the public. Do you have anyone from the public who wishes to talk in favor of the applicant?
I have someone on Zoom.
Or in opposition? I see one name, Brad Hinman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So my name is Jennifer Hinman. My office is at, sorry, I just made you small. Office is at 502 Washington Street, Suite 204 in the Dalles, Oregon. I'm here on behalf of Patricia Hinman, who lives at 1380 22nd Street, which is tax lot, gosh darn it, my computer, is tax lot 1700. I don't know where you guys went on my computer, but can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
Great, then I will just keep going. So we are really only opposed to one little issue. It has been raised and discussed. And I don't, I tried to read the staff report over the weekend. And so that is the only issue that we are objecting to today. I don't see why it's necessity. I didn't see, I guess, the criteria that was mandated to make the connectivity of that easement / access road that extends east-west from 22nd by lot 1300 and 1700. So it goes, 10 feet from my client's home. And so it is number 21. So I just want to state things specifically for the record. It is paragraph 21 on page 49 that talks about how it's not to be obstructed. And I guess it didn't make sense to me the criteria that needed to be met, because if that road was a specific size because of a previous project that IBC was doing that was going to allow access to these 8 homes that they intend to develop. I think it's lot 1300. And it made sense that it was a smaller road. It does interfere with Ms. Hinman's easement rights. And so we get in this conundrum where the city says, specifically in paragraph 15 on page 48 of the staff report, that IBC is responsible to understand where the easements are and where the lines are and what they mean. And then you go to IBC and they say, well, the city's telling us we have to do this. modification of this easement. Well, it's against the law to modify the original intent of an easement, which is exactly what's happening. So according to the city, we have to file a civil suit, which is nearly impossible with the amount of money it costs. So we get ourselves in this conundrum where it appears the city is supporting this modification of the easement, which is a violation of the law. So with the easement accessing the 8 proposed homes out from the other project, okay, it's not a huge modification, but then you have this easement / alleyway running into Henderson Road and Tia Road, which then accesses these 12 other lots, which then will access the next project, which is north of this. So we're talking about a massive amount of traffic accessing this tiny little road that's already been approved for this other project, which I don't think was taken into consideration at all in the traffic report. So the traffic report talked about these 12 lots and what it might do to impact the surrounding roads, but it didn't take into consideration the other 8 homes that are going in there also. And it doesn't talk at all about where this easement alleyway comes out on 22nd Street. It comes out at a point that is already congested. And I can tell you that every day that 4-way stop is backed up past where that alleyway access road comes. So it doesn't make any reasonable sense to require that alleyway access road to be connected to the Henderson and Tia roads, which have full access to Belmont, which doesn't come out at a necessarily busy intersection. And so that makes sense. So on behalf of my clients, we're asking that the commission consider the impact that wasn't considered in the traffic report, that it doesn't have to be connected to Henderson Road, that the easement alleyway, I don't think meets the road width criteria that would be necessary that Henderson Road meets for emergency vehicles. So it just doesn't make sense that that would need to connect. So it would clog up 22nd Street. It would be running right beside Miss Hinman's home. It would illegally modify the original intent of the easement. And so we are asking that it be disconnected, that either bollards be put up or something that could be removed if necessary. And I don't know if y'all have any questions for me, but that is our only issue at this time.
Appreciate that. Any questions? All right, thanks for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
All right, do we have anyone else in the audience, online, who wishes to raise a comment or concern? Okay. Applicant, would you like to make a rebuttal to the comments from the public?
Thank you, Chair Frost. Once again, Garrett Stevenson, applicant's legal counsel. I just want to say that this question was thoroughly evaluated during the annexation process, and I actually pulled up the findings that the city council adopted on this exact same issue. I'm going to read those into the record, and before I do, I'll just note that the Ms. Hinman did not appeal these findings, and so I'm pretty certain that for the planning commission or the council to go the other way based on that testimony would be problematic. If they didn't like what the council determined on this issue, they should have appealed it, but they didn't. So with that, here's what the city found. This is in the findings supporting the annexation on the property. Ms. Hinman argues that annexation of territory over which she purports to hold an access easement would unreasonably interfere with her property rights. As an initial matter, there is no proposal to terminate Ms. Hinman's access rights or modify them in any way. The city finds that the access easement is currently utilized to access properties that can, under the county's R2 zone, be developed with urban levels of residential development. City finds that the easement will continue to be utilized to access properties that can be developed with urban levels of residential development after annexation. In fact, a future development will require only paving of the existing gravel surface and further reservation of utilities and access rights thereto in the plat. The applicant does not propose and is not required to damage Ms. Hinman's property to construct this improvement. Ms. Hinman will have no obligation to maintain it, and Ms. Hinman will continue to be able to use it as she is accustomed. Even if Ms. Hinman's arguments about her access easement were relevant to this annexation application, the council need not referee a potential real estate dispute over an access easement. The record is clear that this real property is owned and controlled by the applicant and therefore may be annexed. Moreover, Oregon courts and the Land Use Board of Appeals are clear that such real property disputes must be resolved by circuit courts, not by city councils. And they cite McNichols v. City of Canby, 79 Oregon, Luba 139. So as far as we're concerned, this issue was thoroughly vetted, asked and answered, and a resolution was determined by the city council. Nothing I heard tonight is anything new. And so aside from the question that we got earlier about whether or not we can put the bollards in, as I said, we're willing to do either one, depending on which one meets the criteria. But as far as this concern about the access easement, we think that question has been resolved and ought not be reexamined at this point. And then if you have actual questions about the traffic, we've got Elizabeth here to answer those.
Any questions, Robin? All right.
I did just have one question. It looks to me like lot 12 is got maybe a driveway off of that.
So it does, we are currently showing it as a rear access to lot 12. If there were bollards in there, it could access either way. Whatever, really, as Gary indicated, whichever the city prefers as far as bollards and access on that lot 12, we're fine with it either direction. But we did show a rear driveway on that, kind of just due to some initial planning conversations we'd had.
Okay.
So,
And is lot 11 also showing that, or it's a little hard for me to read this?
I don't believe lot 11 is. I don't.
Okay, there's no curb cut shown off that, off Henderson to lot 11. So in my report, it says it may or may not, not definitive. So.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I understand this is a subdivision, not like you're not building anything right now, so all of this is subject to change.
Lot 11 does not access off of that. There's a stormwater facility behind lot 11 right there, so.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So, but you are considering potentially, it could be that one or two lots could access off of this in the future, potentially, maybe.
Off of the easement that we're discussing.
Yes.
Right now we are showing one. It doesn't have to. Like I said, it can access off of Henderson. It was more of a preference and discussions with planning that we put it on the rear.
Okay.
At the time, and that was quite a while ago, so it may have changed.
So the applicant is happy either way, whether there's a bollard in the street or not.
Right.
And certainly the applicant apologizes for the ambiguity. I'm sure it'd be more helpful if we bang the table one way or the other, but in this case, it's one of those rare times where we're okay.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
No other questions for applicants? All right, Dustin, back to you. Closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need for procedure in the record to address some of the things raised. Some of them do show up in the staff report. As far as Nolan and Dolan, as a constitutional matter that requires often in land use proceedings like this, the burden of proof is on the applicant. When it comes to nexus and proportionality, those are claims that the city must address. So it kind of reverts to us. And that's was part of my comment that we are obligated to carry that burden, unlike the applicant. So with any revised hearings or excuse me, findings, we would prepare an affirmative response relating to the nexus and proportional aspects of how that water line needs to comply. So I've discussed that with council. We're very comfortable, loop water and water quality resiliency certainly demonstrate a nexus to subdivisions. In terms of proportionality, the amount of a 12 lot subdivision as compared to $84,000 extension, we believe does not demonstrate. This is just in summary, we would have complete findings, a disproportional impact to a subdivision such as this, but we would be obligated to prepare those for your approval. As far as the private street aspect and the through, the site plan that was submitted to you from the applicant does show bollards at that location. And both in planning staff's review of the subdivision of lot 1300, a middle housing subdivision, as well as this subdivision, which is here before you, you have conditions of approval that relate to not only the annexation agreement itself in the ordinance, but also in regards to the subdivision requirements, and I will read them off. It's on page 39. And it relates to the use of private streets and connectivity. This is 1612-060 public facilities. In that finding, you see an excerpt from the city's comprehensive plan. The code states private streets shall not be used to avoid connections with public streets. Gated communities shall be prohibited. Gated communities shall be prohibited when they block street connections that are outlined in the TSP and its connectivity plan. You can see this is a direct excerpt from the city's code. It shows the connectivity location anticipated at tax lot 1300. With my finding included in here, it mentions the street location from 1403 to 1300 and lot 12 relying on that rear access. In order for that lot 12 to have the access as shown in the location, it's going to need to have access from this street. Also, there's a relationship between the shared access point between lot 12 and the middle housing subdivision, requiring that either that subdivision needs to have some landscape area or they need to share the access point. So in order for lot 12 to have access from within this subdivision, in order for the connectivity plan to comply, there's a condition of approval that limits and prohibits the use of the private street to block that connection as shown here. So that shows up in exit in condition 21. In terms of the water line, kind of the outstanding.
Before we jump onto that, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Related to this? It seems like the applicant is concerned, not applicant, the neighbor's concerned that there's going to be excess traffic and traffic bypassing the larger streets through this private road. Condition that's super similar is probably kids at hospital or the same as Casey, right?
Yep.
There's signage, there's speed control, there's a bunch of stuff like that. Is there any reason that we should discuss something like that?
Signage or speed control?
Just
Sure.
to make it so that people are less likely to use it and trying to address the neighbor's concern.
Yeah, it's not in the code to have that. However, if there was conditions that, support that were amenable to the applicant, that's in your discussion. Right? Our engineering staff didn't include them. We didn't include that there's some mandatory signage that needed to be included in the report. So. In regards to the water line, I think this got batted around. I don't see, and in reviewing the conditions of approval, certainly the matter was not resolved in the annexation agreement. And fortunately for you, you don't have to litigate or arbitrate a contract between city council. So that's a good thing. Clearly, we're not interested in having a conflict here. The 10-inch water line was not prescribed at the time of annexation. However, it was not precluded. The matter was left open and was not resolved per the applicant's discussion, per the subject matter, we didn't review the subdivision at that time. We had some terms and conditions that we thought were generally supportable. So I don't believe necessarily that condition 25 is in conflict with the terms of the annexation agreement. Good news is you're not in a position where you have to deal with that. However, we do want to be consistent in those decisions. You know, and I think that's an important note. You are reviewing the subdivision now. So the level of specificity, engineering requirements, for water, sewer, stormwater, lot layout, access, this is the first time that the city's reviewing it. And this is the first time you're being asked to look at it. So, although there's reference to the utility in the annexation agreement, it is not prescribed, and I would not consider it in conflict with that. So, and we can address that as well if you have further questions.
If questions on water line, you bring on the next thing or so.
But we're still water line. Go ahead if you have a question now.
Well, the question is that the point that the applicant brought up is that, you know, there's nothing shown from this system, a planned system facility. And so it seems hard for someone to we have a plan. There's some questions. It seems if we want it and we need it, why is it not in the area capital?
Yeah, not all water lines are included in the capital plan. None of the water lines within the subdivision are included in that plan. However, infrastructure, water, sewer on a localized level become necessary to expand and build infrastructure. So by its absence doesn't mean that it's necessary for localized development. This extension of these water mains the plan is not a complete plan. It would be ideal. However, just because it's not included doesn't mean it's necessary to adequately serve the needs of a subdivision.
I'm talking about past subdivision, 10 inches down Belmont going to nowhere.
It goes to the city's water system. It serves and connects and provides a loop system so that 25% of the lots included in this subdivision aren't on a dead end line.
But can I ask,
What,
maybe,
clarify, so they're being asked to build to Henderson,
Correct?
and then they're being asked to build past Henderson 210 feet to nowhere, and the city doesn't have a plan that we need a 10-inch water line out.
I believe it goes to Henderson and not 210 feet beyond.
Look at this.
That depiction does not necessarily reflect the condition.
Okay, the diagram doesn't reflect the condition. Diagram page 90, it's in both documents. 64?
Yeah, here, let me clarify. On item 3, a 10-inch water main. So this is condition 25, sub item 3. The new 10-inch water main extended west along Belmont Drive to the western property of Lot 1. I think this is part of the confusion. Is Lot 1. This actually goes back to the original 13 lots and 12 lot subdivision. That extension of Lot 1, I believe the engineering terms, Lot 1 is the corner, not the further westernmost property that is now not part of this subdivision. So it's still over it's not 480 feet, it's probably 360 feet. I think our definition of Lot 1 shifted from the initial layout. This lot is not included. Still a 10-inch line, still in Belmont, still subject to the issues and concerns raised.
Still a little bit lost in it. If I look at page 94, I see the little curve in the main that we talked about.
Yep.
On the east end.
That's correct.
I see that line going all the way to Henderson, interconnecting. I see it going another 210 feet. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of it.
I think
At the end of that 210 feet, what is the city's plan?
so say it only goes another 50 feet. But what happens to it after it goes the 50 feet beyond Henderson, I think is the question.
When it goes,
Well, I would- Yeah, I mean, so I guess they're not being asked to build a 210, but. They could build all lot one, but then the question is, where is that going to? Like I can see on Tia, you know, look over there, there's development, but I would, surprising to me that city doesn't have a plan for water main in Belmont if we want one.
yeah, I think what would occur would be future development such as this within incorporated city jurisdiction.
Okay. I'm just trying to ask
Yeah.
if there's any diagram the city has that shows a 10-inch line in Belmont that we need one. And the answer is no.
No, there's no 10-inch.
So the area to the west of this is mostly not city land right now, right?
Not, I would say not incorporated. It's within the urban growth area,
Right.
but not incorporated.
Right.
Vast majority would be owned by the Hanners, Rich Hanners, the orchard, approximately 80 acres.
Mhm. But that area, and then this continues over to like over where the goes to over where the West Side Park is proposed, right? Like, I mean, if you keep going and past the orchard, whatever,
It goes west,
It goes west,
approximately to Frankton.
But so is the city's goal though, I mean, is the applicant correct that the city's goal is that this is eventually a line would go west all the way to Frankton? When all of this becomes incorporated and developed as per the plan for the urban growth boundary? Or urban growth area of land?
I couldn't say that this is a prescribed route, but certainly water, sewer, stormwater service to the west of this property would be necessary for urbanized growth. Whether it's provided by the city, being the only sewer provider, or whether it's provided by Ice Mountain, which is the provider across the street, that is not yet determined. So one of the issues is you're getting into multiple providers in this area. That makes it a little more complicated.
We moved a lot there.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else to cover on this?
No, unless you have questions, I'm here, so.
So Chair Frost, just a procedural issue I wanted to bring up. Dustin is correct that the city has the burden of proof here. I'm not aware of any evidence in the record that supports the engineering necessity for this condition. What he's proposing to do is come back to, as I understand the way this would happen, is that if this planning commission imposed that condition without removing that 10-inch line, that they would then come back with some post hoc evidence to demonstrate why that line is necessary. I want to be clear that if they do that, we would ask for the record to be reopened so that we could rebut any new evidence that comes into the record. Since we understand that there is not sufficient evidence right now to justify the proposed condition of approval. I want to make sure I raise that right now because any appeal that we take up to the city council has to be on the record. So if we don't get our evidence in, or at least have a chance to do so after we see any new evidence the city brings forward on the engineering issues, we would want to reopen the record so we have the ability to do that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's good. The applicant needs to state its issues and concerns on the record.
Can I ask a procedural question? I mean, it seems to me as a commissioner that it's difficult to approve something when the city still says that they're gonna submit evidence. And the applicant wants to respond to it.
Well, you're allowed to leave the record open. So if you wanted us,
With an approval?
they would ask the record to be reopened.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, and it's probably out of turn, but I just want to make it clear. The issue of whether or not the city came back with additional evidence would depend on what the planning commission decides to do on the condition. So if you decide tonight not to impose the requirement for the 10-inch line, then, and you approve the project, there would be no issue of having to reopen the record. It's only if the planning commission decides to impose that condition and the city staff wants to come back and add more evidence to the record that we would want to have the right to reopen the record and rebut that evidence. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Anything else from Dustin before we close the hearing?
Nothing else.
Any other questions for staff before we close the hearing? No.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if we're gonna go down this road and impose this condition. We may not have sufficient evidence for it, as planning staff or staff has told us they would want to add some additional evidence. The applicant's gonna want to respond to that. It seems like if we're gonna go down that road, we can't approve this. Cannot. So it seems like what we should do is have a straw poll to see if we're going to go down that road or not. And if we are, then we leave the record open. And we continue.
The straw poll would be if people wanted
Feel like
to
we're
take
gonna
out
close that condition.
25.
Yes. Is that understanding it right?
Yeah, it would be good for both applicant and staff to know is the condition to stay or not, rather than keep everyone in the waiting. So if you're going to approve it without it, that's like, we can just avoid it altogether.
Right.
If the inclination of the or planning commission is to substantiate its decision and its condition of approval, and you want to see it before it's signed by the chair, and the applicant wants to have the opportunity, then I would like to know that ahead of time before we invest time.
Have city give evidence, have us approve it, have it subject to the chair review, and then have you give evidence. Then
You can make that motion subject to the return and not close the matter.
Chair Frost, apologize again for interrupting. Somebody suggested a straw poll. I think that'd be very appropriate here, because again, if the planning commission decides it doesn't want to impose the requirement for the 10-inch line extension, then we think the record is pretty well settled. I think staff would agree. You can go ahead and vote tonight. The only reason we would want to come back and rebut evidence is if city staff decided to put more evidence in the record. My understanding is they're not going to do that unless the planning commission decides to impose this conditions. I suggest that whoever recommended a straw poll, that you guys do that, figure out whether you want to impose the condition. If you decide to impose the condition for the water line extension, then we could go ahead and set up an open record period, and we can talk about that later if that works.
So how much of 25 are we talking about? 25.
It's number 3.
Is it number 3?
It's 2.
It's 2 and 3.
Yeah, that seems like it's 2.
Yeah.
This is great. So the part that's super confusing about this is we've got 2 plans and 13 lots and 2 lot 1 and a bunch of pictures that show the blue lines going to spaces that. So this condition not clear based upon the materials of the application. If I read this, we're going a lot with past 10%. But if I look at all the pictures, it says something different, and we got lot 1 in there 2 different places. So we have to make it clear.
Well, now my turn, I can make it real clear, just take off the 10-inch line and remove from the condition and then solve it, you guys vote, you're done, so.
Yeah,
Let's do the straw poll. The question is.
well, so let's just make it clear, right? So there's a bunch of pictures in here that we've been talking about, which I don't think are accurate. So let's.
So, but maybe condition number 25 needs to be read, but at the end of the day, the question is whether applicant needs to extend 10-inch line from 27. west at all, whether it goes to Henderson or beyond Henderson, wouldn't that be to the end of what used to be called Route 1, right?
I think there's no current. Yeah, so the question is, this parcel being part of the subdivision.
Right, but the point would be is. Question number one, do they need to extend west from 27 to line up with the end of this? Question number two, do they need to go beyond Henderson out into somewhere? Or to the end of their own frontage? Their own frontage, okay. All right, so let's just do a quick check here. So the question is really to end this line along Belmont. Do we want to include those portions of this position number 25 income? What are your thoughts here?
I mean, my thought is having the whole system looped and having more opportunities for connection makes sense. So to Henderson makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I would sign the staff and go with the recommendation to go to Henderson.
Okay.
I honestly, this makes me a little bit weary, about it. Frankly, this thing's been, I mean, I'm bound to commission that long, but on your behalf, I think it's probably the most confused about the commission. You know, I don't wanna err on the side of caution here, honestly, I'm more in favor of continuing trying to sort some of this out more than anything, but I'm honestly kind of more inclined to remove it.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to leave it in, subject to the city demonstrating that it's part of a plan.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, it's like if we have to build streets a particular width because it's gonna be a particular designated street and it's part of our TSP, then we can have an applicant do that, and I think I can get myself to the same spot if the city can tell me that this is part of a plan.
Okay.
I think I'm also, if I have to choose, I would probably go at this point with leave it in, assuming that the city is sticking to their position on this because they can prove whatever burden of proof it is that they have to present to ask for that. But I do also feel extremely confused. It feels a little like it's an arbitrary asking that's happening because I feel like I don't have enough information to really understand it. And I figure if the city doesn't actually have enough to prove that it should be required, that then people whose pay grade is higher than mine will duke it out in the appeals process. So that's where I stand on that. Keep it in.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, as it stands now, I'm inclined to remove it.
All right, so with this matter, my vote, that's for it.
Let me ask is, the question I have is like, for the city, it's kind of like, well, why don't we, if they don't even have a plan, why does it have to be a 10-inch line? Why is it bigger than all the rest of lines in the subdivision? Why is it an 8-inch line? How do we know it's not a 14-inch line? Like, I want someone to give me a plan.
Okay, well,
It's really random.
sounds like, we want to see a little bit more.
Yeah, so- Chair Frost, this is purely a administrative question, but since it looks like the desire is to have staff submit new evidence to support the condition, what we would ask, consistent with state law, is for a 777 open record period, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, so that you have everything in front of you with enough time to review it before you come back to deliberate next month. I assume that's when the meeting would be. So we would ask that whatever city wants to submit be submitted within 7 days of this meeting, that we would have 7 days to rebut that, including argument and evidence, and then we would have 7 days of final written argument.
Yeah, no, I think no, I mean, I feel, no, I feel. No, I'm struggling with this idea that it's something that wasn't raised during the annexation, the approval earlier. That's where I'm struggling with the most. I think if there was if it was on a plan, then I would, if it was part of the plan and the applicant was aware beforehand, I think that would have been one thing. But to throw this new requirement on them, I'm a bit perturbed about it. So I would vote to not have the 10-inch line from 22nd West at all. If the engineers say that it's not required from an engineering point of view.
Well, it's my, you know, it's, we're taking time away from some approval for the applicant, which is definitely. But we could always see what additional information the city can present to us, and if it's doesn't seem that it's, I mean, this is a problem, right? We can get additional information, we can have some city smart people tell us that this is why we need 10 inches instead of 12-inch or 26-inch line. We can see that evidence, I guess. Not to continue.
Right, yeah. So I think we continue. Do we want to pick a date certain? That works with 7/7?
You can either acknowledge that, or you can select a date certain to have the matter remain open. So I think the request for 7/7/7 is to keep the record open for a certain amount of time. You can also have the opportunity to continue to a date certain.
So does that, so December 4th, then would that?
We want to make sure that December 4th is good for everyone's dance card.
Chair Frost, give me one moment, but before I look at December 4th, I just want to say, I really think in this situation, because what I don't want to have what I would call a raw continuance, where we just come back and we leave the record entirely open until we come back. The problem with that is that if the city does not produce its evidence until shortly before the hearing, we will not have enough time to respond to it, and the commission will not be briefed on our position with adequate time to make a decision. So we really do feel that in this case, closing the oral record at this point is appropriate. The city can put whatever it wants to say in writing. We can respond to that in writing, and do our final written argument. And that way, when you come back, the only thing to do is to deliberate on what is in the record. That's what we think is appropriate here. I don't want to have kind of a back and forth with city staff at the hearing. I'd rather get everything on the table with enough time for you guys to consider it and then just make a decision, because to your point, we do want to get this thing approved and on.
Sorry, are you saying post record except for this one?
Yeah, so the way, what I requested is to leave the written record open, but close the record to further oral testimony.
Okay.
And I think that's appropriate here. We set up a 7/7/7, so we know what the city wants to say a week from today.
Yep.
You know what we want to say a week after that, and then of course we have our final written record.
Okay, if you want us to set it to the December 4th, or just leave it open?
December 4th, or I guess it would be your deliberation, looks fine to me.
Okay.
Dustin, do you have any comments on this process?
I'm wondering about, do we need 3 7s or do we do 7 and 7? Because we're now the respondent and you get to respond to our next submission. So we don't need 3. We could just do 7 and 7 and come back December 14th. Because we've now flipped to, rather than the applicant.
December 14th?
4th.
December 4th.
No, only 14 days, not 3.
Well, I want to reserve final written argument. You guys have your week to.
And you would have that in the response to ours. So do.
Well, we may or we may not. The 7/7/7 is 3 weeks, but I think that still works. You have everything.
You would, what I'm saying is, do we need 3 7s? Do we actually just need 2?
7s because.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want us to combine our final written argument with our response and close the written record a week early, I don't see a problem with that, but it wouldn't affect when you do deliberations.
Well, that was the question is, are you trying to get us back in 2 weeks?
No,
Okay.
I just don't think we need 3 rounds of respondent, response and final.
Yeah.
We don't care when we need to show
Well,
back up.
You would show back up at the same time. We need, as far as respondents and applicants, to to kind of have this vetted and agreed upon and.
Yeah, what I would say is what you're gonna see, I assume this is engineering discourse here. And I'm not gonna have a whole lot more to say about that from a legal standpoint. I'll probably reiterate the points you've already seen. So if you want to do 1 week for the city to proffer its evidence, 1 week for us to respond and include in that response our final written argument. And then have the record closed for you know, have the record close a week early, that's fine. I just want to make sure that because the city is trying to admit new evidence, that no matter what process you use, since the applicant has the burden of proof, that we get the last word.
Sounds good.
So we're looking for a
Yes.
motion to continue until,
We're gonna, I think we're looking for a motion to close the verbal,
Close the deliberation.
No. Close this hearing.
verbal.
oral testimony. Okay, so we're looking for a motion to close the oral testimony. Leave the record open, 7 days for submission from the city, 7 days for response from the applicant, and continue until December 4th for council or for planning commission deliberation, something like that. Is
Yes.
that what we're doing?
I would not presume to tell the planning commission what to do. I just had one question. There was a question about whether the 20th would work for reconvening for deliberation. I don't know if that's possible.
I don't think we're actually saying that one. I think we're going to 4th of December, but yeah. I don't really. I mean, it's for you that we would want to pick a date, not for us.
Right, but you'll have to get back together to vote, so,
Yeah.
my client asked me if you guys were able to meet on the 20th, but it sounds like.
Oh, I mean.
No, I'd rather not have your response received the day of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And I would like to have it out a week in advance, typical for public vetting.
We get a set.
You also get a set.
The 4th is fine.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna have a motion to close the oral testimony in file number 2023-26. Keep the written record open for 7 days for submissions from the city, and then 7 days for response from the applicant. And to continue our hearing on this matter until December 4th for deliberation.
All right.
Sounds good. Second motion.
All right, we have mission motion table to continue hearing, closing the verbal testimony today. For the response period. Any further questions? All right, let's see how we vote.
I vote aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. All right. Thanks for your time, patience for tonight, and we'll see you on December 4th.
No, we have no matters.
Yeah.
Is there any of this whole traffic control thing?